hence I found myself incarcerated for 5 years due to my adventurous, risky, dangerous, and self-destructive frolicking. Yeah.
Frolicking. Why did you get sent to prison? I frolicked too
Oh
much.
no. It seems fitting.
Welcome to Sacred Not Saved, a space for the curious, the deconstructing, the mystics, and the misfits.
John,
Joy.
this conversation is definitely 6 years in the making. This
Yeah.
episode, yeah, 6 years ago this month, we
Mhm.
were heading back from Atlanta after visiting Jana, our sister. And you and I connected a lot. We really had some time, like we had talked about before. Like you had said, the three of us had never been together uh, like that. Probably that that length of time for a decade, maybe half a decade. Yeah, a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So we were driving home. I was driving, you were in the back seat, and we were just talking about, I think mom was sleeping, and mom had joined us, and we were talking about all the deep things of life and connecting on such a really deep level and learning a lot about like where we were in our spiritual journey. And you had shared well, first you asked me, "Hey, can I share this like little clip with you?" And I was deep in my um my beautiful, I'll say it, my beautiful dance with God. I was
Yeah.
deep in it, but I was also steeped deeply in Christianity. I was about to the next month head off to ministry school.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's why we took the impromptu trip because we knew that I was
Right.
across the country. So we're like, let's just do this. I knew your belief system had changed a little bit, but I didn't know exactly where you were at. And then we continued to talk and then you said that infamous phrase and you're like, I don't know if I believe that Jesus had to come and die for our sins anymore. Or you might have said, I'm not sure if I believe that Jesus is the Son of God anymore. Do you remember what exactly you said?
That we, I'm not sure that I believe that we needed or need salvation, therefore it calls into question
Everything else.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you said that, I mean, things just moved so fast in my head and in my heart. And I was like, I felt the fear rise up, the quick thoughts of, wait, we were raised in the same household. We were what you're moving away from what we were taught. What are you doing, John? Like you're willingly like it felt like you were stepping out of the family. I know that sounds dramatic, but that's how it felt in my body. It was a clench, it was fear. And I'll never forget, that was the first time I ever heard the term hold space. And God very clearly spoke to me and said, Joy, hold space. And I didn't know what exactly that meant. I was
Even though
like,
you had been doing it for, in perpetuity, you've been holding space without calling it that
sure.
and
Yeah, but
knowing,
I
yeah,
didn't have a phrase for it. And then he said, Joy, validate him. Uh, let him be seen and known by you. And do you feel, and it was just this, I think I was quiet for a little while. Like I was really trying to process, which is not like me. I'm not typically, I always have something to say. And I was like, okay, okay, God, I will hold space. And he said, do you feel that fear that's coming up? Do you feel it? I want you to choose something different. that fear was very familiar when somebody would come with a different idea or a different belief, a different mindset. It's not like I didn't have friends that were of different belief systems, but I think it was definitely heightened by the fact that you were my brother and you were family, your blood. And so I I said, "Okay, I'm going to choose something different." And I had no idea that in that moment that that was a pivotal moment for me, for us. It was a
Hmm.
pivotal moment for us in our relationship because then we began to go down journey together almost in sharing our deep questions, our the things that didn't make sense to us, the the revelations that we were having that were so exciting, that were so outside of the box,
Yeah,
completely outside of the box. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the beginning of my awakening journey. And you had already been on quite an awakening journey.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You're the first person in my life that there was a risk of being rejected in sharing this, right? It was there were stakes. There were stakes in the game, and but you like you said, you paused and you responded with no defensiveness, no no energy of correction, right? Um, and you did. You held space for me, which I mean, for the first time in that whole in my awakening slash deconstruction process, I felt seen and that it is okay. Even though we don't like I knew we weren't going to see eye to eye and agree on some of the, some of the things
Because
that
you knew that I where I stood,
yeah,
and you knew that I wasn't ready to budge. So I think the beautiful thing also was you shared with such an energy of vulnerability, and it didn't seem like you were trying to change my mind. And I think that's a big key takeaway for those of us who are on this journey of we have to let people have their process. And I felt like you were honoring my beliefs and yet still saying, well, this is my, and what's funny is you hadn't even put your stake in the ground there. You hadn't owned the idea. You hadn't uh, completely dismissed the idea of substitutionary atonement, right?
right.
You were questioning, and to be in that questioning space and sharing from that space, that is so challenging. That is brave because
Thanks.
you don't have any certainty. But isn't it kind of how that works? Like this journey is a journey of uncertainty.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I yeah, I didn't have I mean, especially at that point, I didn't have any new um s- religious or even spiritual framework. Um, I didn't have a substitute ideology that I immediately latched on to. I mean, I still don't, but so yeah, that was definitely very much in that kind of just throwing it all at the wall and seeing what sticks, questioning all the truths that I had decided and that were told to me were imperative to believe and agree that they're true. Um, I I was very much in a place of just questioning what resonates as truth to me. What do I see? What fruit do I see coming from any of this? That was the litmus, kind of, is what.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you tell me when you remember that process, that journey, that stepping out of the box started, the questioning?
Yeah, about so about a year into my 5-year sentence of incarceration, I there was a shift, a turning point where up to that point I sought answers, comfort, refuge in the only thing I've ever known to or been allowed to seek those answers, those things in. And so I really dove deeply back into reading my Bible daily. And I mean, that's kind of commonplace. You see, it's funny because as new guys come in, you kind of see the same process, the same where people are you in that place of hopelessness and despair and total loss of everything you've ever known, like your entire life, the people in it, the comforts, the um your future. you know
Sure.
you, you're you're saying goodbye to a lot of things, and so people cling to religion, and so I clung to that. I clung to
What you were
reading my
taught.
yeah, it's what yeah. And so I was s- finding Bible studies that I was doing, just solo Bible studies, not in any kind of group setting. Um, I they do have church services there. And I went to a couple before I learned that the church is basically where people with pedophiles and people with sex charges, they congregate and find their safety and refuge there. But it's very much, it doesn't matter where you go. Like what I went to 4 different camps, I think, throughout my entire sentence, and that is it is a it's true no matter where you go. And so
Really?
you become, as much as I wanted to find community there and find fellowship, uh, it wasn't allowed. Like
So that wasn't an option then. So
it wasn't.
community slash tribe
Yep.
wasn't even an option for you.
Nope. And I mean, obviously, I'm pulled out of and I'm removed from any sense of community or tribe or family that I've had up to that point. So trying to find a new one, trying to find, because we need each other. Solitary confinement is the worst form of um, punishment,
Sure.
especially for long term. So, and even though I was in uh, it was a dormitory housing with 70 some odd other guys, all living in the same large warehouse style room. Um, you keep to yourself, and you don't want to go trying to make friends right out the gate.
Sure.
That's right. So it was I was on my own. I was on my own, and um, you know, feeling hopeless and lost. And so again, yep, just dove into what I knew I could find peace and comfort and solace in the past, and but also very confined to only seeking answers, peace, solace, comfort, security in the things that in specifically Christianity and the framework that is confined to. And so it was not to say that it was fruitless, right?
Sure.
Because there were, I mean, it served its purpose, and I did, my relationship with God definitely did um become deeper and evolved, and I did get to experience, love and comfort and security in in that process. But about a year into that, there was a process of just like that feeling kind of hollow, or um, just a miss. But that wasn't a new. That was not a new sensation, or like that feeling of this doesn't quite resonate as the truth, the whole truth, or my truth. And so I guess, yeah, that feeling that something's amiss,
Mm.
um, that had always been there throughout my whole life.
And growing up, I didn't know that. You had never shared that, uh,
No.
that you were like, okay, I'm doing my best. I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing. I'm seeking
Mhm.
God, I'm praying, I'm fellowshipping, I'm going to church.
Yep.
I'm trying to honor my parents,
Yeah.
all the things. You and I didn't do a great job at that, but
There was some
yeah,
stumbling along the way, but yeah.
sure. And but I didn't know that you were kind of in a space of questioning or just feeling like you said slightly hollow.
Yeah.
Um, but I love that you also said that there was fruit there too. While you
Yeah,
were in prison during that
definitely.
first year, you were like, okay, I'm going to use whatever tools I have available to me.
Yes.
And you
Yep.
had found comfort in the past with God.
Mhm.
You
Sure.
had experienced peace. I want to say, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I do know a lot of your story.
Yeah.
I want to say you even found comfort in reading the Bible at times, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
revelation, and
Yeah.
God spoke to you through scripture or his word or whatever.
Without question. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that the fruit that you're speaking of during that first year of maybe dropping down deeper with God in more of a raw, surrendered space
Hmm.
during that year, though it was still hollow and you felt like pieces were missing, do you feel like that was a good, almost like God, source, love set you up to be able to jump from a place of security rather than frantic um
Yeah. That's interesting that
chaos?
you frame it that way, because yeah, sure, sure, but that hadn't really crossed my mind until you put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So basically you didn't, a lot of people, everybody's journey is different, but some people are just so angry at God. Like I said, I want to hold big space for everybody's has a unique journey, and even if you have to jump straight into anger and rage towards God and disappointment, and then you find your truth as you go along, and that's your starting off point, that's okay too. But I find it really beautiful that you were able to your foundation of stepping out was somewhat full of
It
peace.
was from a very innocent and like non-resentful. Yeah, it was from a pure place to where like my gripes with the church with didn't really like surface or become known to me, like real pronounced to me until like much later on in my revisiting that.
As the layers are peeling back,
Yeah, yeah,
you're looking back going, "Oh,
the shadow work.
yeah,
You know,
yep,
once you really get real with all this shit. Yeah.
yeah, totally."
So there was just this shift a year or so into this that I was looking for more. I always had this feeling, this kind of, I don't know, knowing or curious or wonder. I maybe wondering, we'll
Mhm.
call it. This wondering, there's gotta like there's more to this. I don't, that is it
There's
really
kind of
is it and I'm talking about what was conveyed to me, taught to me as Christianity, as salvation, as the path, the only path, and the way that that was framed, as that was taught to me throughout my childhood and and
sure.
on. So that's not to say like I don't want to especially in this season of my life, I find myself in a place of don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
um
Do you think that, can I ask you a question?
sure.
Little side note. Do you think that your I'm gonna play on words, you're like, I was wondering, and it's
Mhm.
like, I wonder if you were seeking the wonder of this life that you
Yeah.
came here to live, that we all came here to live, the wonder of it all. It's the certainty of Christianity. Everything's very certain, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
this is how it is.
Yep.
And I'm also wondering if this sense of adventure that you had within you for
Hmm.
the more of God, so to speak, the more of life,
Hmm.
didn't play out in rebellious ways because you were seeking adventure. You were seeking the more, and we didn't have permission, and I can speak for both of us. Our parents were amazing. Our
Sure.
mom was awesome in a lot of ways, and yet we were told that you're not allowed to step out of this
Oh,
box. And
yep.
so we both, having very similar personalities, we both felt very constrained by this box.
Well, when eternal damnation is what hangs in the balance, anything short of that is what I'll play with. So all right, I won't touch this. I'm sanctified at this point, right?
Right?
And so, all right, I'm imperfect because we all are. We've acknowledged that. The Bible acknowledged it, right? Um, so anything short of questioning that is where I will frolic and adventure, right?
Sure.
And push the limits and yeah,
Risk, and you'll
risk.
risk in other ways that are
Yep.
more in the 3D
Yep.
world.
Uh-huh.
You're not
Yep.
going to risk your eternal soul. So I'll be risky in my behavior here
Everything up to that point.
in this.
Yep.
Yes.
But from that point on is off limits. Yep.
Yeah.
So yes, yeah. Um, Hence I found myself incarcerated for 5 years due to my adventurous, risky, dangerous, and self-destructive frolicking. Yeah.
Frolicking. Why did you get sent to prison? I
I
frolicked too
don't know.
much.
It seems fitting.
Sure.
Wasn't always frolicking, but anyway. So yeah, but there was this turning point where I there was no moment. There was no moment or experience or conversation or anything like that. Um, but it was this slow window opening of giving myself permission to ask questions that I've never allowed myself to ask, even though they've always lingered in the periphery of my, of my self, of my consciousness. But um those were off limits, you know? And so it was just me, myself, and I. And somebody lent me a book, again, right about that year into my incarceration. Somebody lent me a book, and it was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah.
And
Great book. Great book.
incredible. And I get that maybe it's not everybody's cup of tea, but it absolutely blew my world open. Um, it and I think, he opens the book with sharing his story of sitting on a park bench in solitude, while the world is buzzing around him. And you know the the way he frames his life experience up to that point was so familiar, and resonated so much with me, as far as just feeling lost and feeling uncertain. And then there was this moment where he chose to just sit and breathe and um, look within. And that was such a foreign concept. That was, you know, and that resonated with me so much, with the environment, with the place that I was at in life, and the circumstances and the environment I was in. I'm I'm a man on an island in the midst of chaos, not chaos, sometimes chaos, but the world buzzing around me, you know? And yeah, when you're living in a dorm with 70 some odd other guys, and I mean, there are everything's going on around you, and you sit on your bunk and you observe. And so I guess this was the point that my focus and my intention and my observation shifted from the outward to suddenly, like, I was given permission to observe inward. And
Mm,
I it just
beautiful.
it was it was a world I never knew was there. I don't really know.
Why do
I
you
don't
think
know how to describe it,
I
but
no, I'm tracking with you. Why do you think that it was a world that you never
I was
explored?
okay. That's a good question. That's a great. um, I was terrified of it.
Why?
Um, I've always been a really deep thinker, overthinker, um, a really big feeler, deep feeler, and man, the things that I felt throughout my childhood and the thoughts that I thought, I didn't think, and I don't, still don't know if anybody would relate, but um,
So there was shame in there, sounds
n-
like.
well, okay, shame was definitely always part of my identity, part of like present in my life within me.
Did you know that at the time, or
But
is that something in hindsight that you're looking back on going, oh, wow, I carried a lot of shame?
really, just in hindsight,
Yeah.
it was so integral to it was just a part of who I was and how I interacted with the world and with myself. So yes, so yeah, shame was a component. That's not necessarily uh, where I was going, but that's the for sure, definitely. Um, I just had some real like scary, deep, overwhelming existential feelings and thoughts and questions. And so, yeah, like going within was something that only happened when when my subconscious just chose to do that.
And it took
There
over.
was never any intentional inward um, focus to speak of, you know?
Sure.
And in fact, the times that I would either dream or find myself in a in that place was so overwhelming that I don't know I didn't want to go there.
Yeah, we didn't really have the tools. We weren't really taught the tools.
No.
The tools available in the church or in Christianity were rather limited because it was, even though we were taught we're one with God
Hmm.
because of what Christ did, right?
Yes, but that concept, those are just words, and
Yeah, sure.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
that never settled in a way that I know that now.
right. And
Right.
and so but we were taught, we were told with words, you're one with God, but everything else screamed at us, God is outside of you, and you need to ask him to come. You need to ask Jesus to come into your
Yes.
heart. You need to ask for help because God is not here in you with you right now. God, that's such black and white framework because there's some nuance to that, of course,
Sure. Yeah.
depending on denomination and what church you go to and what you're, you know, encouraged. But for the most part, if you could break it down, it's basically you're you're on your knees because God is outside of you, you're at his feet, so to speak, or and that requires dualistic thinking, and that
Mhm.
requires, even though that's not what we were told, it's that's what's That's the message that we receive.
That's how it was framed. It was framed with a very dualistic framework, right?
Mhm.
With some exception, with some nuance there, right?
Right, exactly.
But breaking that rigid framework of dualism and entertaining more of, I guess, the Christian mystic, the mystic framework, which is, I mean,
There is no separation. There is,
it's rooted in that in nuance, right?
of
And that
course,
there is right. And it doesn't throw out the dualism either,
right.
but but it integrates it as a whole, right?
I love that. Yeah, I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Yes. Yeah.
As opposed to, you know, warring factions of right and wrong, black and white, and
Yeah. And so therefore you didn't go within because it was scary and uncomfortable and super overwhelming. And and you were never taught, it sounds to me like you were never taught any tools to trust your heart too. We were, right? I mean, we were never taught to trust the heart is wicked. That's what the Bible says,
right,
right?
right. Yep.
Yeah.
And the feeling that I had, and again, this was like very rooted in, well, this is my in my identity, right? Is, well, yes, I'm flawed and wicked and I'm a sinner. And to the extent that I don't want anyone to know. And I don't want to be found out. And I'm a fraud. Eh,
God, isn't
If
that is the human condition, John?
yeah.
I bet you if people were honest, that is most people, if not everybody, would admit to that. Yeah. Wow.
So not only did I not want anyone else to find out about that, I didn't want to be proven of that. Yeah, I didn't want to have to come to terms with that. I can know it without really knowing it, you know? And so, like, okay, we've established that. Cool. Put that on the shelf, right?
Moving on.
And now I'm going to act as if, I'm going to play the part. But yeah, so that the foray into my awakening and my giving myself permission to explore this, explore the rest, right? The uh that I integrated, that I really, with the guidance of that book, of The Power of Now, because it was the first thing that, like, as I read every word on each page, I f- it felt more true than anything else I had ever read. And it was my guidebook into stepping through that door. And um and it's not scripture, but as far as I'm concerned, it is just as much scripture as any other holy book, in the sense that it's truth.
Mm.
And all the while, I respect what anyone else, may think on the contrary or believe on the contrary. I,
It's sacred writing.
it's
It's
sacred,
it's
yes.
it's sacred writing. It's funny because I found that to be true during my journey as I was diving into other books, and I had basically I used to say ate of the word, so to speak. I was in
Sure, yes.
I was in the Bible. 1 to 3 hours a day, every day for a decade, maybe or more. And and I I would say God spoke to me, Spirit spoke to me through the words on those pages. And
Mhm.
it was powerful. And then as God led me and love led me towards other writings, whether it was a book that has been published in the last 10 to 20 years, a more recent book, or other writings that are sacred that are much older in time.
Mhm.
I I'm getting the same exact feeling in my body, in my consciousness. I
Yes.
was extremely familiar with that feeling of Holy Spirit speaking to me.
Yes.
I was
Yes.
beyond familiar with that.
Hmm.
And the fact that I felt like Holy Spirit, because I hadn't deconverted yet, I was like, oh, you're speaking to me through this. And it's just as powerful. And
Yet it's
that was
secular.
mine,
Yet it's secular, right?
right?
It
Like,
and
how can this be? No, God only speaks through his word.
yes. Yep.
And so it's like, wait, no, that's truth and love can use many different channels.
Yes.
And
Truth
that was
and,
mind blowing to me.
and light. I look at it as like illuminating, shining a light on a truth beyond the very restrictive truth that I was told I'm limited to. Yeah, I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
So cool.
So yeah, that was my first experience with meditation, with breath work, um, visualization and um, presence.
Mm, yes.
That opened up a door to to presence that I had I don't think I had ever experienced before.
Wow.
And in practicing, not like, he guides you through again some visualization exercises and breathing along with it, right? Uh, but in just taking this new concept, this new practice, and this new intentional focus throughout my day, whether I'm in, commuting somewhere, like I'd be on a work squad bus on my way to with 30 other guys or whatever on our way to a job site, and I'd sit there and practice what I'm newly learning and find myself with an overwhelming sense of peace, joy, gratitude, um, love, and contentment. Like there wasn't anything missing. I don't know.
Isn't that wild that you can have your human freedoms completely stripped of you? Your freedom's gone
Mhm.
here.
And every creature comfort, every
Absolutely. And yet you said you found contentment.
hmm contentment, comfort, and no sense of lack. Like which was something I've always been
That was
very,
unfamiliar for
yeah,
no sense of lack was very unfamiliar to you, right?
totally,
Yeah.
totally. Yep. And that was the ground floor of it was just too it was too good, it was too real, and it was just the I felt like the lingering question, not that there's one question, but the lingering question that's always been present in my periphery, and not even in my periphery, it's like it's always been front and center. I pushed it to the periphery. Um, Suddenly that lingering question has been answered.
Wow.
And so it was like a spiritual exhale, or and I just I said, well, if this is evil, and if this is wrong, and if this is off base, um, I I need to be proven of that. Otherwise, I gotta follow. I gotta just put one foot in front of the other, and
There you go.
say yes to this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and isn't it all about experience?
yeah,
Like I'm experience what I'm you cannot tell me what I'm experiencing is false, is evil or dark, or why is my whole entire system lighting up? Why is my heart finally at rest? Why is my
yes,
mind finally at rest? Why
yeah.
is my body able to exhale like you were saying? And I think it's funny breath work because just our very breath is is some would say spirit moving in and out, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that you were encouraged towards breath work is such a beautiful new way to take the concept of spirit and of love and of God into a very tangible, oh my goodness, there's always breath within me.
Mhm.
I'm never separated from it. I'm never
Mhm.
separate from my breath. And then, like you said, on just wherever you were throughout your day, you like on a bus, oh, I have access to my breath. I have
Yeah.
access to presence right now,
Yep.
no matter what. And isn't it funny that like we're told, I think I threw this out long before I ever deconstructed. Um, I think it allowed me to dance with God in a more intimate way. But in the very beginning of, I don't know, our upbringing in the church, we were told you must have your quiet time.
Mhm.
You're set apart. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some really great aspects to setting aside time. I think daily practice is essential.
Sure.
But that idea that this is where I encounter God is when and then I'll throw up some prayers and some pleas and some requests or some gratitude throughout the day. But the fact that you can take your practice or your time, your intimacy with Source with you all day, it sounds to me like you had never experienced that, living in that much closeness with the divine.
No. No, because as far as carrying that throughout my day, well, prior to that, and particularly throughout my childhood, it would have been my focus would have immediately fallen to what do I need to do?
There you go.
What do I need to do?
There you go. It's not,
Or
it
not,
wasn't.
or stop doing, right? What do I have to
Yep.
do or not do? And that will, even though that's not really what's taught in Christianity, but
That's the
that's
message.
where I found
Yeah.
myself.
That's
Yeah.
the message that we get,
Yeah.
unfortunately. A lot of us get. I can't speak for everybody, but
Like what's getting in the way? What am I doing that's separating me from God and from that peace and that sense of the peace, joy, and gratitude. And so, well, if I'm not experiencing that, if that's not my current experience, what's what am I doing or not doing that's separating me from that?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a
Yeah,
rabbit trail.
and we can we're definitely gonna have more discussions at a later date, but I'd love to unpack that with you because I think that boils down to sin, our definition of sin.
Yeah,
Because sin, we were taught, is a doing rather than an entire just mindset of not knowing our identity. But that's, like you said, a rabbit trail.
yeah, yeah.
So you were in it, you had access. I remember us having phone calls uh, during this season, and we were in completely different places, like obviously theologically and with doctrine, and you were stepping out, but I was watching you. The fruit was undeniable.
Okay.
The fruit was undeniable. I couldn't argue with it. It was it was kind of what everybody, if they're really honest, is looking for, and you had found it.
It's what I was always looking for. That's I can only speak for myself, but yeah, yeah. But I guess the fact that you witnessed that is really
Yeah.
interesting.
Can't argue with fruit.
I didn't need anyone to witness it necessarily. I didn't need
Mm.
anyone to validate it or agree with me. Um, sure, that's great when I get that, but
That's when you know, I think you have found your center
mhm.
and your truth is when you don't need anybody else to agree with you. That you're like, I know what I've found and I know what I'm sitting in. I'm what I'm experiencing. I get to just be. So if you want to question that, that's fine, but nobody's going to take this away from me.
Yeah.
This is this is
And also, I didn't feel like I needed to convert anybody either necessarily, right?
yeah.
Uh, it was just such a deeply like personal process that okay, I've never felt like anyone would necessarily that I never felt like anyone really understood me or what I experienced, what my life experience was, right? But the difference here, while that held true, was I didn't need anybody to agree with me or understand. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that the what really stands out to me, excuse me, was when you started. I love that, I don't want to put a framework around it because, everybody's journey is their own, but it seems like most people go through this point of learning how to love yourself because you are no longer self-abandoning. You're no longer abandoning that part of you that was shameful and deep and overwhelmed. You sat with it and you allowed it to be, which then, is that integration
Yeah.
process that we all have to go through, and it's the self-love journey. It's the learning how to sit with yourself and love yourself, and then all kinds of fruit comes out of that, from that space. And what stands out to me the most is when you were having to deal with, I mean, God, you saw a lot of scary shit in prison.
Hmm.
You experienced a lot of hard stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but one of them being, and I don't know, I don't remember the exact details of, but I would love for you to share that where you actually learned to love your enemy. You went
Yeah.
beyond, okay, I'm loving myself, and now you are able to, you have so much inner stability that the external threats are no longer a threat.
Yeah, I guess to piggyback on that, and I guess, well, I'll give a little synopsis of the scenario. And man, this was really early in, I mean, this was only a matter of weeks, a couple months, or maybe even weeks from the start of this process of, again, experiencing sustained peace, joy, gratitude, presence. It reframed a lot of things. And so, what you're referencing was I had a guy on my work squad who he was he had to be the alpha and the kind of tell everybody else what to do. Didn't wouldn't stand to be challenged. Didn't like to lose, whether it be in a game of volleyball or a hand of cards. Um, and so I don't recall what led up to this contention between he and I, um, but it was there, and especially while we were out on site working, I was expecting. I'm like, at some point, he's gonna I'm gonna have to fight this guy. He's gonna come at me. Hopefully, it's just with his fists and not with a shovel or some kind of weapon. But
Which
I
which
was, yeah, I
which
was
is very common, right? Like let's set the stage here. Weapons in there and makeshift weapons. You witness some pretty gory things, and then going to blows, getting physical with another inmate. What would that have looked like for you? What,
it that has its own consequences
that's what I'm
whether
saying.
you started it or not. It doesn't matter.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, you're going to
Possibly not getting a shorter sentence. You were hoping, you know, get out early, good behavior. It could look like what, solitary confinement.
30 days in confinement, loss of gain time, meaning you potentially don't get out as early as you could. Yeah, and then if now this guy happened to not be affiliated with any gangs, but um, if that's, I mean, that's a prevalent part of prison politics, and it's just something it's there, and that's a whole other layer of something you have to respect, and don't, you don't get caught up in that. Uh,
Sure.
so this was, but yeah, it was a mortal threat, and I thought it was impending. I truly thought it was just a matter of time till, all right, that's going to happen at some point. So I'm, as far as like always looking over your shoulder, because he was in my dorm too. So 24/7, we're in the same space,
Wow.
and um, there was, I went from having a hatred for him and a um, reducing him to his character flaws, which was his character to me. That was the entirety of his character to me. To and I don't recall what it was that shifted my perspective on this, but one day I looked over at him and I saw him as like a 6-year-old boy.
Mm.
And the the sorry,
You're good.
the innocence that was there, that at some point was robbed of him was that's all I saw. So it was all I could do. It was all it was almost beyond me as far as choosing like how to interpret that or how to feel about it, but it was bizarre. Like I saw like a 6-year old him, and the I was just overwhelmed with compassion for him as a human, and um and I felt a true, deep, pure sense of love for him, love and compassion for him, and forgiveness for what for the threat and fear and animosity and anger and hatred that I had carried towards him and felt towards him. And it just it really rocked my world. I mean, it really changed everything. Um, because this was one isolated incident with one person, but it totally turned my framework on its head as far as judgment goes. Um, and I found that I could access that and look choose to use that lens and that perspective from that point on. And yeah, yeah, it was powerful.
So tell us the end of the story. Did it end up in blows? Did you get a shot
No,
to the face?
no, no. In fact, you know, I don't know. It didn't. This just came to me right now, but it was in practice. I guess what I did was turn the other cheek, and like nothing he did or said from that point on really it didn't stick, it didn't land, and therefore I didn't my ego was out of play, and um he changed
Yeah,
in the
because
process.
your energy changed.
And
He changed. Yeah.
eh, and to the point where like nothing there was no interaction or conversation between us that acknowledged anything that had was previously transpiring, or that anything had changed. But by the end of this time period where we were in the same dorm and working together, um, there was this just silent acceptance and respect for each other, and like you know we would even if one of us had like said a joke or what something humorous transpired, like I remember one instance, and I don't remember what it was, but where like we both laughed about the same thing while like catching each other's eyes. And so and I was like, wow, and that I guess that was the moment where I was like, oh, this whole thing is shifted.
Yeah.
And um yeah, yeah.
God, that's beautiful. Yeah. And I'm so honored that I got a front row seat. Well, sort of. I got to witness all of that through,
Yeah.
phone calls and letters, and
I
that's
was trying, I was actively trying to be relocated because of
mm, because
that
of that.
situation. Yeah. Because I
Yeah.
was like, a matter of time, like sleeping with one eye open and not feeling safe to turn your back on someone while out working. And I mean, it's just,
You're in constant hypervigilance.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Which I've watched you heal from. You've done a lot of work on your nervous system in the last how long ago? How many years? Where are we at now?
Um, well, I started my sentence. Well, my charges were in 2012, early 2012, and um, I obviously went through county jail and the whole court case pending process, which was a year and a half. And then once that was finalized and I was sentenced to 10 years split, 5 in prison, 5 on probation. Um, so August 2013, I was sentenced and went to prison, and then 5 year, well, just shy of 5 with my game time. I got
So
out
yeah,
2018,
on that,
the end of
sorry.
28. So 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
2018 was when you got off probation.
No, 2018 was the end of my uh, actual incarceration.
I see. Oh my gosh. So our trip to Atlanta was shortly after you were released.
Yeah. Yes. It was very
I
shortly
didn't
after.
realize that. Yeah. Wow, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
Yeah. That trip was really special.
it was. Yeah.
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 So many people are maybe who are listening and watching are either deep in the process of this journey of awakening, of coming home to themselves, letting go of a lot of things that brought them comfort and security. And I'm sure there's also people that are just beginning that journey and afraid to even question or speak out, right? If you could encourage them with one thing, what would it be?
The moments or periods, seasons of where you might feel where you feel more lost than you ever have. Um, there's an answer to that. Like that's like the question, right? That's the but there's an answer. There's a reason for it. There's a purpose. There's the beauty of that season, even though it's fucking ugly and dark and isolating at times. Um, I don't know. I see that as almost being plagued by a question. Even it's not necessarily a question, but almost like being plagued with a question that the answer is ever elusive, but the answer comes at some point. The the rest of it, the flip side to that coin. Um,
Yeah, it does.
and I I got to acknowledge you as being such a an incredible um, invaluable asset to my process and component, not just asset, but like you have been, I don't know, my process would have looked so differently without you. And so I can only hope that everybody can find and have somebody in their life like I have in you. And um, it's so deeply personal. But if if you have somebody that you can walk through this with, that's
It makes it makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it?
yep,
Yeah. Even though I was a step behind for a little while.
for a minute. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for a minute.
Now
But
you were right, but you were right you where you were
I
supposed to be.
I stayed true to my journey.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
On that note, I want to touch on something.
Yeah.
You witnessing you in, prior to your consequential awakening, right? In deconstruction process. Witnessing you in deep in Christian in your practice of Christianity, I aspire like the fruit that I witnessed and the person that I knew in that was something that I so badly wanted to aspire to.
Mm,
Um, and what's interesting is I com I always compared myself to you
mm,
and felt, and this is no, and again, this was all my internal process, right?
sure.
Um, but felt inadequate to you and what I witnessed.
Mm,
And um, I wanted what I got to witness. I wanted what you had. And but at the same time, I'm where I'm at now and where I've been in this process mostly is a point of a place of acceptance that I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and that comparison and um, contrast between what I'm witnessing in somebody else and what I'm experiencing in internally is not at odds, right? Um,
sure.
I just thought I that came to me earlier when you were sharing, and I wanted to tell
Thank
you
you.
that yeah, I
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, we've definitely learned from each other. I would love to unpack that topic at a later
Hmm.
date.
Sure.
Just just how our travels on this
Hmm.
existential questioning path has been a beautiful dance, and how we've learned from each other, and the similarities and the differences. Yeah, it's been really fun. And like I
Yeah.
said, that's why I do what I do. I walk people through their deconstruction journeys, because sometimes people don't have a sibling or a friend. I was blessed to have you and two other really close friends that I went to ministry school with, where we all three of us went through the same journey at the same time, questioning. So it didn't feel so dangerous.
Okay.
Still extremely painful because it's a lonely road regardless of who you have next to you, because it's
Hmm.
so personal and it's so individual and it has to be your own. You have to take ownership and responsibility. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's uh it's a wild ride.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I love you.
I love you.
Well, okay. Well, till next time, we're gonna do this again. Hopefully pretty soon. I'd like to do a part two, and
I look forward to it.
yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks for being so brave to share your story. I know this is the first time you've actually told it
Yeah.
and put it out there. And it's
This is,
time.
yeah.
It's time because I've watched you and you are a powerful man. You are so healed and so whole and still learning and still messy
Yeah.
and like we all are. And it's just a really huge honor to witness that and to walk alongside you. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us. Remember, you don't need saving, you're already sacred. Until next time, stay wild.